Every year, 12 million tons of plastic waste flows into our oceans, killing millions of seabirds and mammals and causing billions of dollars in damage to marine ecosystems. Southeast Asia is one of the leading contributors to the plastic waste crisis due to rapid urbanization and outdated waste management infrastructure. To combat this problem, TerraCycle is announcing a Clinton Global Initiative commitment to action to launch a material recovery center for waste management in Southeast Asia. TerraCycle will scale its existing model to offer community-led educational programs and to implement canal, river, and beach cleanup programs. Human health is also tied to the health of our aquatic ecosystems, and both depend on the responsible consumption, disposal, and processing of plastic waste. TerraCycle and its partners are empowering people to take action in their communities to end the plastic waste crisis.
Please welcome Dr. Asha DeVos.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Asha DeVos. I am a marine biologist and ocean educator, and also the founder and executive director of OceanSwell, which is Sri Lanka's first marine conservation research and education organization. It was established in 2017, which tells you something about the state of our oceans, the fact that there are countries in the world where we're still only now establishing organizations to handle the crisis that we have at our hands. I'm best known for my work pioneering long-term research on blue whales in the northern Indian Ocean, but through my organization, we do a lot of different things. We try to address a lot of the urgent marine conservation issues, including illegal shark fisheries, maritime disasters, stopping ships from killing whales, and so on and so forth. If you've paid any attention to the news lately, you'll know that the world endured one of the hottest summers on record, on land and also in the ocean. Just a few years ago, our daily average sea surface temperature broke our 2016 record, not something that any of us want to celebrate. And marine heat waves have become a common occurrence. So we are at a crucial turning point in the history of our relationship with the oceans. We know more than ever before, and today on our planet, we have all the capacity we need to drive the change that is necessary before it's too late. But whether we drive this change or not is truly up to us, as we all know. So gatherings like this are important, but it's also really important for us to recognize the individual actions that are keeping our hopes and our oceans alive. I'm very excited today that I actually get to talk to some of the people out there from varying backgrounds who are trying to do incredible things to drive change for our oceans. And to kickstart, it is my pleasure to introduce MAURA HEALEY, Governor of Massachusetts.
Good morning, and thank you so much, Dr. DeVos, for all that you do, your incredible advocacy, and we are all looking forward to the fireside chat and to this morning's panel. I want to thank President Clinton, Secretary Clinton, and the entire team at the Clinton Global Initiative for the work you do day in and day out across so many fronts to bring our world closer together. I want to thank this morning's presenters and panelists. I had the pleasure to meet with many of you this morning, and thank you for being here. And some of you traveled very, very far. I only came down from little old Massachusetts, but some of you traveled so far to be here, and we are so grateful that you're willing to share your expertise, your leadership, and your experience with all of us. And thank everyone for coming to this conference, for your commitment to our planet and to our future. In Massachusetts, we understand in a profound way that human life depends on ocean life. Our bays and inlets, beaches and salt marshes, estuaries, ports, and harbors make up more than 1,500 miles of North Atlantic shoreline, almost equal in length to the entire East Coast as the crow flies. This connection to the sea is in many ways the source of who we are. From the indigenous peoples to the new waves of arrivals from around the world, our ocean has provided our sustenance and mobility, our trade and economy, our people, and our way of life. It shaped our culture of hard work and innovation, responsibility, revolution, and evolution. Now, one of my sheroes is Rachel Carson, of course, a founder of the modern environmental movement. She fought against prejudices of her time, and she changed the world with bold and brilliant truth-telling. Her passion for nature developed in part during summers spent in Woods Hole on Cape Cod. In her book, The Sea Around Us, in 1951, she wrote of the wonders of ocean life, but she also issued a warning. She said, quote, "It is a curious situation that the sea, from which life arose, should now be threatened by the activities of one form of that life. But the sea, though changed in a sinister way, will continue to exist. The threat is rather to life itself." More than 70 years later, no words could better describe the tragedy posed by the despoilment of our oceans, and it's why we're here today. It's not only the health of the sea that's under threat, it's the food we eat, the air we breathe, the jobs so many families depend on, the coastal communities we live in, and ultimately, of course, the human well-being across our planet. That's why in Massachusetts, since taking office in January, we've worked to act urgently. We established the nation's first ever cabinet-level climate chief to make sure that everything we do across government, from healthcare to transportation to housing to infrastructure, is done through a climate lens. We're just now preparing to cut the ribbon on America's first utility-scale offshore wind farm, and we've issued wind energy RFPs to meet 25% of our total annual electricity demand. We launched the first state climate bank and the first in the country that is focused exclusively on affordable housing, which will allow us to advance environmental justice as we decarbonize the building sector. We've issued regulations to remediate and prevent nitrogen pollution in the waterways of Cape Cod and along our coasts. And we recently issued over $31 million in grants to cities and towns for locally led climate resilience efforts, adding a new emphasis on environmental justice. Our grant enabled the Stockbridge-Munsee Band of Mohicans to reclaim 351 acres of their indigenous homelands and establish tribally driven conservation strategies. But there's so much more to be done. We're a state of historic firsts. In this country, Massachusetts is home to the first public library, first public school. We pioneered access to universal health care and marriage equality. And we see that legacy as an obligation to lead in this time. So this morning, I'd like to take an opportunity to announce two groundbreaking new steps. The first is on biodiversity. Currently in Massachusetts, over 430 species are listed as endangered, and scientists estimate that worldwide, 1 million face extinction. We've spent decades working to protect our natural resources, but with climate change accelerating the decline, biodiversity loss threatens public health, economic stability, food security, and our emissions goals. To counter this threat, this week I will sign an executive order directing our state to establish biodiversity conservation targets for 2030, 2040, and 2050, and to develop strategies to meet these targets. These biodiversity protections will be the strongest in the nation, exceeding the global 30 by 30 goals. They will also be the first to extend, or among the first to extend, to coastal and maritime habitats. Steps taken will include working to stem the loss of our salt marshes, which provide critically important habitat, protect inland areas from storm impacts, and remove large amounts of carbon from the atmosphere. And we'll be looking to strategies such as marine protected areas to ensure coastal and ocean habitats critical to our biodiversity can not only recover, but thrive. We know that our seas and forests are the most fundamental climate resources we have, and we are determined to protect them. That brings me to the second action I can announce today. This week, I will also sign an executive order that bans the purchase of single-use plastics by state agencies in Massachusetts, effective immediately. We know that plastic waste, plastic production are among the leading threats to our oceans, our climate, environmental justice. In government, we have an obligation. We also have an opportunity to not only stop contributing to this damage, but to chart a better path forward. So we are proud to become the first state to adopt a procurement ban on single-use plastic bottles. In our coastal state, we know climate change is our biggest threat. We also believe that taking action is our greatest opportunity, an opportunity to secure a safe, prosperous, and sustainable future. But we know we can't do this alone. To quote Rachel Carson again, "Through delicately adjusted interlocking relationships, the life of all parts of the sea is linked. Those same links of biodiversity bind all of us together. Our natural world recognizes no political divisions, and neither should our work to protect it. So I offer Massachusetts partnership, and I invite colleagues and leaders across America and around the world to join together and take action for the health of our oceans and the long-term well-being of our people." Thank you.
Thank you for your commitment, Governor Healy. I'd like to now welcome onto stage a friend, a very powerful advocate for our oceans, Louis Pugh, patron of Oceans United Nations Environment Program. Good morning, everyone. Once again, I will say, Louis, when I was invited to come for this event, the minute they mentioned that you'll be here, that's all they needed to say. It was my golden ticket, because I'm very excited, obviously, about all the work you do, but particularly excited to be here to welcome you back after your grueling swim. That was 315 miles down the Hudson River, 32 days. So I think it was like 10 miles a day on average. Every day I followed your posts and the wonderful work that your team's been doing to inform the public of what was going on, who you were meeting. And every day I was increasingly exhausted just reading about it. So I think to open up this chat, it'd be really nice to just understand, how are you feeling? Physically, mentally, yeah.
When you finish a really big swim, there's so many emotions. Exhaustion, I mean, she's a long river, 315 miles, and she's also a really incredibly beautiful river. I mean, to swim high up in the Adirondack Mountains is such a true privilege. And so exhaustion is one element, but also a lot of hope. I met so many people who are so proud of what has been achieved in the Hudson River. And so I come away actually quite rejuvenated. Yeah, a lot of feelings.
Well, that's great. That's what keeps us going, hope, as always. Hope with action, right? And that's what it is. So when we think about your swim, you've done you've swum all the oceans, right? That's been your big achievement, but now you've turned to the rivers. Why?
Yeah, I'm not going to abandon the oceans. I'm a saltwater animal like you. But it became increasingly obvious to me. So, for example, I try to do swims in parts of the world which are far away, but what is happening there will impact all of us, to shine a light in places. And I do that by literally diving in and swimming in these places. So, for example, in 2007, I swam across the North Pole. Right? And I swim in just a Speedo cap and goggles. There's no wetsuit, there's no dry suit. And so these swims get an awful lot of media attention. But I'm so far away from people. And so once I've done a swim, for example, across the North Pole, then I've got to go to London, I've got to come to New York, I've got to come and deliver the message. And I did a swim recently across the Red Sea. And, you're swimming from coral reef to coral reef, and you're out in the middle of the oceans, but you're not close to people. The wonderful thing about rivers is that almost all of us are close to a river. And this was the one river in the whole world where I could actually swim down this river, where so much work has been done over the past 50 years to clean it, and then deliver a message into one of the greatest cities on this earth about how important rivers are, not just for water, but also the impact which rivers have on the oceans. Because everything that we put into the oceans, whether it be industrial waste, whether it be agricultural runoff, whether it be litter, all that not only kills the river and kills everything inside the river, but it goes out into our ocean and does exactly the same thing.
And that's a really interesting part. Like you say, rivers bring you closer to people. But the fact that rivers are surrounded by people is why we also have a lot of threats around rivers, right? A lot of human interaction, there's a lot of runoff, there's a lot of pollution, there's a lot of stuff that goes on. And I think, I remember telling a friend of mine that you were going to swim the Hudson River, and he's like, why would he do that? He'll just be sick, right? But that's because, we think about these rivers as very polluted spaces, but it is heartening to see the work that's been done today has brought you here, and you swam and you're still here.
It really is truly astonishing what has happened in the Hudson River. So 50 years ago, the Hudson was one of the most polluted rivers, not just in America, but in the world. I spoke to one person, and this is an interesting story. I spoke to one person who lived on the banks of the Hudson, and he said that he would wake up in the morning, and one day the river would be red. And then he'd wake up the next day, and the river would be blue. And then he'd wake up the next day, and the river would be a different color. And that is because he was next to a motor company factory, and it depended on the day what color car they were actually making. I mean, just think about that. And that was only a few years ago. And New Yorkers eventually said, enough is enough. And then they started cleaning up that river. And they literally went mile by mile, town after town, factory after factory, and they turned the fate of this river around. And I think that this river can be, and let's not be starry-eyed about this. Yes, we have to be very, very vigilant. There is still pollution. There is still PCBs in the river. There only last month, when I was about to start the river, there was a talk about actually releasing nuclear waste into the river from the Indian, from the power plant which had just been decommissioned at Indian Point. So we must always be vigilant. But this is an amazing story about a community which came together and drove change.
This is great. This is where hope begins, and it is wonderful because we all live in countries, like you say, rivers are everywhere, right? And just knowing what is possible is quite incredible. So you've helped to protect over 2 million square kilometers of vulnerable ocean. Most people see you swimming in these spaces, right? Like that's the part that is visible, it's visual, that's what we find on social media. But what else do you do behind the scenes that has allowed this to happen?
Yes, so what I do is I do the swims, and these swims get a lot of media attention. If you get down into your Speedo and then you go to Antarctica, they get attention. But that's the beginning. It's to highlight the issue. It's to undertake a swim in a place which has never been swum before. But then afterwards, you need to do the hard graft. And so there's certain parts of the world which just really resonate with me, especially Antarctica. You know, ever since I was a little boy, I was always dreaming about going to Antarctica. I grew up in Plymouth in England, and you know, as a young boy, you hear all the stories about all the British explorers who went down to Antarctica. And then when I was 10 years old, I moved out to Cape Town. And so I was just that much closer to Antarctica. And even as a young boy at school, I was looking out over the horizon and thinking, you know, one day I want to go down to Antarctica. And the real moment happened in sort of 2015 when I sailed down to Antarctica to an area called the Ross Sea. It's an incredible part of the world. And did a swim there to highlight how important it was that we finally protected it. You know, for 17 years, the negotiations to protect the Ross Sea had been going on and on and on. Ever since David Ainley, the American scientist, had pointed out that we run a real risk of losing this last true wilderness area down in Antarctica. And so I went there, I did a swim, and then I went to Moscow, because it was the Russians who were the one country which hadn't agreed to protect the Ross Sea. And for 17 years, as I say, these negotiations had gone on with all the diplomats. And it's amazing because I met a man there called Slava Fetisov, who was also a sports person, and then he introduced me to all the key decision makers in Russia who would have to sign off on this to get it across the line. And I kept going back and back and back and back until eventually they agreed that they would create a marine protected area down there. And the moment that that was announced, I can honestly say, because it is such a special place, when you go down there and you see these emperor penguins tobogganing across the ice, and you see the humpback whales and the skuas and all this is a precious place. And the moment that was announced was the happiest day of my life.
And that would be your biggest success?
Uh,
I feel like you've done so many things, it's hard to pick.
You know, there's so many precious parts of the world. I grew up in England on the coast of the English Channel, and we only had 7 square kilometers of fully protected waters in the United Kingdom. I mean, think about that. 7 square kilometers were fully protected. In the rest, you could have industrial fishing. The Royal Navy could do gunnery exercises, NATO exercises. You could have oil and gas drilling. Only 7 square kilometers was fully protected. And so I went to the CEO of Sky News, and I said to him, you know, a lot of people, about 2,000 people have swum across the English Channel, but nobody, which is 32 kilometers, but nobody swum the full length, which isn't 32 kilometers, but is 528. So I said to him, I don't want to do the width of the English Channel, I want to do the length. And so he said, I'm going to give you daily coverage, and I'm going to use you to tell a story about this ocean and this channel and what we're doing to it. And so every single day I was on Sky News saying to the British government, we need to sort this out, we need to pull up our socks, we need to be protecting at least 30% of the world's oceans by 2030. I get to the end and the environment minister comes down, and the first thing is he says to me is, he says, Lewis, we've heard you. I said to him, I wish you'd heard me before I had to swim for 49 days. Anyway, a month later, the British government came here to the General Assembly and they agreed to 30 by 30, protecting 30% of the world's oceans now by 2030. And they used their full diplomatic weight to urge other nations to join them in this mission. And since then, 130 nations have agreed to this. Now, yes, there's a vast difference between making a pledge, a commitment, and actually delivering on it. But if we can do that, I think that'll be good.
Amazing. So individual action counts. That's something
Yes.
to remember. But also individual action has a lot of teams behind them, right? Like there's always a team behind you that supports you, which is incredible. So there's a lot of people committed to the cause, and that's, you know, and you know, you're an ocean advocate. You spend a lot of time in the ocean. You spend a lot of time in water now, not just the ocean, the river as well. What do you see as critical action that must take place to protect our oceans?
There's so many things. I mean, we could have an awful long list. Let me just highlight a few of them. It's really, really interesting to see who are the most influential people in modern society. Are they musicians? Are they actors? Are they politicians? Are they sports stars? What are they? And there's been study after study on this, and it turns out that 50 years ago it was very different to what it is today. Today, by far the most important and most influential people, sorry, not the most important, the most influential people in society are sports people. They have enormous fan bases, and there's an authenticity to sports people because you see them fail, you see them rise again, you see the determination, you see their values. I think that it's time for those people who are in the ocean, using the ocean, sports people, be they swimmers, surfers, kayakers, rowers, sailors, kite surfers, all these people who love the ocean, I urge you please to follow the surfers. And the reason for that is because the surfers have been so influential. They really have stood up and they've said, you know, been at the forefront of protecting our oceans. So that's my one request. I think the other thing, most other important thing is with this 30 by 30, remember 130 nations have agreed to this, but there are another 60 nations which haven't. We do have to get them across the line. And then lastly, grassroots funding. Everything, when you start thinking about philanthropy in the world and where all the money goes, very, very little of it goes to the environment, and even less goes to oceans. And when you look at that pie and who actually gets the funding, it's a number, half a dozen, really big organizations. Now, I'm not saying they're not doing important work, Asha, but what I am saying is that ultimately stuff has to happen on the ground. Beaches have to be cleaned. Awareness campaigns have to be done in different cities and different communities. And that has to get down to grassroots level. And so the challenge is, how can we ensure that those funds are distributed to the people who are actually going to do the work?
Brilliant. I totally agree. As a person who runs a grassroots organization, there's a lot of impact happening on the ground that gets overlooked sometimes. So thank you very much. Unfortunately, the clock is flashing. I think it's time for us to get off the stage, but I could talk forever, hear all your stories. Thank you so much. Congratulations to you and to your wonderful team for all the work that you've done. And now I'd like to welcome Rick Ahrens from Smart Freight Center for a Commitment to Action Progress Report. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And my name is Rick Ahrens. I'm Director of the Sustainable Freight Buyers Alliance, a leading initiative of Smart Freight Center. We are a global not-for-profit organizations focusing on uniting freight buyers and suppliers to reduce their logistics greenhouse gas emissions. Logistics emissions account for 10% of the global emissions, and they are on the rise. And companies are increasingly expected to take responsibility for the greenhouse gas emissions. However, many of these companies also struggle to implement effective strategies and collaboration with partners to take action. That's where the Sustainable Freight Buyers Alliance comes in. Since the start of its commitment in 2022, the Sustainable Freight Buyers Alliance has been seeking to facilitate connections between freight buyers and their logistics partners to create a neutral, trusted place for collaboration, knowledge sharing, and collective action. The Sustainable Freight Buyers Alliance today has a diverse set of multinational corporates and now consists of 50+ members, including organizations that also pollute sometimes, unfortunately, but they actually also the driving force behind change, such as Amazon, DHL, Maersk, Dow, or Nestle, that actively also seek to collaborate together to reduce their freight logistics emissions. We help our members and partners to design and execute collaborative projects, as well as co-create tools and discuss implementation of what zero-emission logistics looks like. Furthermore, we help our members to navigate the complex policy landscape and also to drive that change where required. For instance, we recently started actually the tendering of 10,000 electric trucks. Electric trucks are on the rise, and together we can make that shift happen sooner than later. We are enthusiastic about the future of the Sustainable Freight Buyers Alliance, especially once we can dissolve ourselves and zero-emission logistics has been achieved. And we aim to work together with you, our partners, and our members to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 1 billion tons by 2030 and to reach zero emissions by 2050 or earlier. Thank you.
Congratulations, Rick. Please welcome Brenda Torres from Estuario for a CTA announcement.
Buenos días. Good morning, everyone. Brenda Torres Barreto. I'm Executive Director of the San Juan Bay Estuary Partnership, also known as Estuario. We're based in Puerto Rico, and we're a 501c3 organization. From increasing temperatures, rising sea levels, and heavy rainstorms, to lack of maintenance, investment in infrastructure, and public policy support, Puerto Rico has become more vulnerable and unable to handle catastrophic events such as the one we experienced in 2017 with Hurricane Maria. The natural infrastructure along our coast that for thousands of years have acted as the first line of defense during extreme events is without support, since there are no intentional mechanisms to adapt to a different climate reality. The high recurrence of this impact sets back Puerto Rico from recovering in time to face the next disaster, pushing an already fragile region to a highly vulnerable state. Involving the economically and ecologically impacted communities in the design and decision-making processes could very well be part of the solution. That's why Estuario is announcing a Clinton Global Initiative commitment to action to train and empower 150 youth, high school youth, to engage in citizen science to acquire skills and knowledge in coral reef, seagrass, and mangrove assessments and restoration. This commitment expands Estuario's Coastal Resilience Citizen Science certification, so these young students can acquire scientific skills through training with expert scientific organizations to scale coastal resilience efforts throughout Puerto Rico. Estuario aspires to inspire them to eventually join the blue-green workforce in coastal resilience, one capable of assessing its own risks, vulnerabilities, and assets, particularly after extreme weather events. The Citizen Science Certification Program will bring resilience to vulnerable coastal regions of the San Juan metropolitan area by restoring the capacity of seascapes to continue to serve as the first line of defense. It is also part of a greater effort to empower citizens to develop adaptation and restoration projects in their coastal communities. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Okay, now on to the panel. I don't know if this was as tall all this time. Anyway, I discover a new thing every day. I'm very aspirational about my height. I think that's the problem here. Anyway, so now I'm very excited. I'm going to introduce our panelists for today. We're coming to the end of our program, but I'm sure you're all very rejuvenated and very hopefully you'll leave here hopeful, but recognizing what your potential, individual potential, is also in this space. I want to start off by introducing Marie-May Jeremy. She comes from the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust. Please join me on the stage. And then we have Sam BENCHEGHIB from Sungai Watch. Please join me on the stage. And finally, Dr. Whitney Johnson from Salesforce. Welcome, all three of you. Very excited. You come from very different backgrounds, are doing great work for the oceans, and so we have a little bit of time to explore some of the work that you've been doing. So I'm going to start with you, Marie. Seychelles did something really great. They launched the world's first sovereign blue bond back in 2018, mobilizing $15 million for blue economy projects. Seychelles has also protected over 30% of its ocean, surpassing its portion of the global commitment to protect 30 by 30. What accounts for Seychelles' success, and how can other countries follow suit?
Thank you, Dr. Asha. Good morning, everyone. Such a pleasure for me to get a chance for me to speak a little bit about the work that we're doing within Seychelles, but more importantly with the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust. So in answering the question, so for us, I think what has worked in terms of our specificity has always been around the government commitment and the engagement with the local partners in the country. So we have benefited, of course, being from a SIDS and a small population that helps us as well in terms of leveraging the necessary support from the local communities, because our oceans is truly our identity and everybody can relate to it. So for us, that has been a plus. Also in terms of our success, what has worked for us is that we had a few things that were working in our favor in terms of the partnerships that we currently had, but also that we had at the time, but also now that we have been able to bring on board. So for us, when we started with the Debt for Nature swap, obviously with big players like the TNC, which believed in the work that we were trying to do, and also in promoting a blue economy at the time that a lot of people didn't believe in. So we're very happy to see that this has received traction, and Seychelles was one of the pioneers really in driving the blue economy concept at the time. So in terms of the successes, that has really helped us to fashion that, and coming up with the blue bonds in 2018 and launching the first sovereign blue bond allowed us to design a financial mechanism that would directly respond to our needs on the ground around sustainable fisheries and ocean conservation, and this then continues.
That's fantastic. Okay, hold that thought, because I'm going to go out to Sam, but I'm coming back to you. Sam, you've been on a quest to protect the oceans for a long time now. And your work has been focused on rivers in Bali. So two-part question, why rivers, why Indonesia?
Sure, thank you, Dr. Asha. It's an honor to be here representing Indonesia. But I think when we speak about ocean plastic pollution, it's important to note the sources of where this plastic is coming from. And I think there's really two reasons for where that plastic comes from. The first is that there's a clear lack of waste management in a lot of countries around the world. And the second is that we're not protecting our rivers enough. 80% of plastics in the ocean come from our rivers. So that's why 3 years ago with my brother and sister, we started Sungai Watch. Sungai means river in Indonesian. And we really had this simple idea, what if we could place a barrier in the world's most polluted rivers to stop all this plastic from getting there? And the data changes year to year, but Indonesia is always in the top 5 of the world's most polluting countries to the ocean. For a very long time, it was ranked second, just behind China. And in the most recent studies, Indonesia is now 5th, with the Philippines now leading the charts. But you know, Indonesia really clearly has a lack of waste management. 32% of waste is formally collected. So 68% is mismanaged, 50% of that waste is burnt openly, and 10% reaches the ocean. So that's really what we're trying to tap into, is fixing that 68% of no waste management and making sure that it doesn't reach the rivers. But you know, I think at Sungai Watch we really realized the potential of these simple barriers, and so since launching we've installed 200 barriers throughout Indonesia's most polluted rivers. We've removed 1.5 million kilos of plastics from rivers, and now, you know, we're really trying to focus on how do we scale the project to Indonesia's most polluted regions. So right now, it's all about fundraising, implementing, and cleaning as many rivers as possible.
That's amazing. Lots of power there. Great story. Okay, got more coming back to you, but I'm going to move on to Dr. Whitney right now. So we all know Salesforce as a software company. but now obviously it's turning to ocean sustainability as well. And what is and what should be the role of the private sector in the fight for ocean health?
Thank you. And I want to express my gratitude for the invitation to join this conversation today. And I also want to say thank you to all of you. We're in a room of ocean leaders, and so I want to thank you for the investments that you're making in ocean health. Salesforce is investing in ocean health for two reasons. The first is, I think, common among all of us, that we depend on the ocean. We depend on a healthy ocean. And for so many of the reasons we've heard about today, the ocean is a source of food and oxygen and livelihoods. And it's also a source of joy for me, and I think we've heard some really exciting stories about that today as well. And then second, we believe that business is uniquely positioned to drive impact. So every business has a set of superpowers, from their product to their expertise, from their voice to their influence across their value chain. And we believe that business has a responsibility to use those superpowers to drive change. So some of the things that Salesforce is focusing on, we focus on accelerating the world to a net zero future. We focus on leading the nature positive movement and energizing an ecopreneur revolution. And ocean action is part of each of these pillars and priorities. And to illustrate a few examples, Salesforce is a founding member of 1T.org, and we have a commitment to conserve, restore, and grow 100 million trees this decade. And this year, we're focusing that commitment and action on restoring and growing mangrove forests. These are coastal forests that support biodiversity in the ocean because they serve as nursing ground, breeding ground, and feeding ground for the fish of the sea. And second, we have a 10-year, $100 million commitment to climate justice and ecosystem restoration. And over the past 2 years, we have leveraged that fund and that commitment to invest in 9 early-stage mangrove projects around the globe. And this is really critical because we need early-stage investment for these projects to demonstrate pathways to success, to conduct feasibility studies, to gather baseline data, and define their projects so that they can then seek further follow-on funding. And then third, we, in addition to investing in an aggressive and I would say ambitious, rather, decarbonization program across the business, we are also working to nurture the growth of the blue carbon market. So we've set a goal to purchase 1 million tons of high-quality blue carbon, and as a first step in pursuing that goal, we then co-sponsored the development of the high-quality blue carbon principles and guidance. And this work, while it's core to who we are, it is also essential to our success, because when the ocean thrives and nature thrives, we thrive. And so that's, I think, the role for business.
Brilliant. Okay, Marimi, I'm going back to you. So, marine conservation doesn't happen in isolation. People's lives and livelihoods depend on it. So how do we ensure that investment in ocean conservation actually reaches these local communities that need it?
Thanks. So this is exactly the work that we do within SECAT. So the way the trust has been set up, our main message is around ocean stewardship and empowering local people in the Seychelles, being your NGOs, your CBOs, individuals, to get access to funding that they can go ahead and then do the work on the ground. So really, we come out here, we fundraise, we work with partners, and then we have set up what we call a Blue Grants Fund. This is a grant mechanism that we have established since 2017. That was capitalized initially by our Debt for Nature swap proceeds, the blue bonds, but now more and more we're inviting new donors and partners to put money into the Blue Grants Fund, and therefore we are able to support projects. We support projects that are related with conservation work, restoration work, rehabilitation work with mangroves, and also ocean stewardship around research, citizen science, waste management, pollution. More and more now with the younger generation promoting ocean research, marine scientific research, which is a big gap for a small country like Seychelles, so trying to build that capacity locally. And so this is how we're trying to work. So we're saying that through the trust, we are able to bridge a lot of the administrative issues that makes funding difficult to reach the grassroots. So we are here, we build their capacity, we help them develop their programs, their projects, but we also help them to trial and nurture new business ideas that are more nature positive. Looking, for instance, at coral positive ventures. We're working with NGOs also for them to trial out new plans and programs to promote coastal resilience for climate change. As you know, as a small island state, we are at the forefront of the impacts. We face it every day, especially with coastal erosion and now sea level rise. So it's that kind of reach that with the work of the trust we're trying to facilitate.
Brilliant. That's really great to hear. Sam, I'd love to hear a bit more about the solutions you have developed and how has it impacted communities? How are you hoping to scale it? Please tell us more.
Sure. So the solution is actually very simple, and that's what makes it so effective. At Sungai Watch, we're really on a mission to create the most scalable approach to tackling plastic pollution by having simple barriers in as many rivers as possible. So when we find a financial partner or a sponsor, we typically focus per region to have as much impact locally. We install our barriers in as many polluted rivers in that region as possible. We hire a local team and train them. We build a local waste sorting center, and we're ready to operate. And what that looks like is on a daily basis, our teams go out on the ground, they clean every barrier, they collect the trash from the barrier, they weigh it on site and report that data to our database, so that our partners can then track the performance of their barriers almost in real time. And then they bring the trash back to the waste sorting center. And from there, we're able to sort the trash that we collect into 30 different materials so that we can properly give value to this waste and recycle it. But we now operate in 6 regions, and everything from the barrier technology to the cleanup mechanism to the sorting station itself is really designed to be simple, cost-effective, and scalable. And so today at CGI, I'm really excited to be making a commitment to action, to be bringing Sungai Watch to the city of Jakarta. Jakarta is the Indonesian capital city and also the second most populous city in the world. So there's 34 million people that live in Jakarta. And what that means is Jakarta is now facing a huge waste management crisis because of the large population and the lack of waste management. A lot of this waste enters our rivers. What this means for Jakarta is not just an eyesore with plastic-filled rivers, but it seriously impacts the health of millions of people in Jakarta because so many people in Jakarta rely on this water to bathe, they rely on this water to cook, to wash their clothes, and this also makes Jakarta a lot more vulnerable to flooding, which is already a problem that Jakarta is really trying to solve. When trash floods the irrigation channels, the water overflows and displaces hundreds of thousands of people in the city of Jakarta. So with this commitment that we're making today at CGI, we're really excited to be installing 100 trash barriers throughout Jakarta's most polluted rivers, to be building a sorting center in Jakarta, to hire a local team of 60 people, and to be removing 3 million kilos of plastics from Jakarta's rivers to hopefully, stop these crazy floods and also, provide a cleaner source of water to millions of people. So we're very excited to make that commitment here today.
Congratulations. Nice. Nice, something wonderful to celebrate this morning. Thank you for that. Okay, over to you, Whitney. Salesforce worked with a number of other partners to develop the high-quality blue carbon principles and guidance. How can governments, nonprofits, and private sector work together to scale the blue carbon initiatives, and what are some of the best practices for community engagement?
So blue carbon can be one important source of finance for coastal ecosystem restoration and conservation. But there are significant challenges to scaling blue carbon, and there are important roles for government and private sector to play, and in particular for the government and private sector to play in collaboration with one another. So the three challenges for scaling blue carbon are: first, we need the right enabling environment for blue carbon projects to be developed. So that means that we need clear and strong policies to be put in place. Second, we need early stage risk tolerant capital to help in project preparation. So we need to see more innovation in the finance space. Some of that's why I'm excited to hear about the stories in the Seychelles. But there's an important opportunity to drive and create, envision blended finance solutions that can address this key bottleneck in the development of blue carbon projects. And then third, we need alignment around a globally agreed set of principles for high quality. And this is why Salesforce partnered with the World Economic Forum Friends of Ocean Action, the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance, Conservation International, the Nature Conservancy, and the Meridian Institute to develop a shared vision for high quality. And we did this through an open and collaborative process with contributions from over 70 organizations that we then synthesized into this shared vision. And this was launched at COP in Sharm el-Sheikh last year with the support of 19 influential early adopters. And because it's so important that we have alignment around a shared vision in order to deliver on high quality for people and nature and climate, we're inviting others to join us in adopting these principles and guidance. And you can do this by emailing HQBC for high quality blue carbon at oceanriskalliance.org, or you can ping me on LinkedIn. So I'm happy to connect you. So all of that in short is that we have a lot to do, and there is a role for everyone, and partnerships will be key.
Yeah, that's true, and that's what we've heard across the board. Partnerships have made everything possible, and we can't work in isolation for a place that's the largest part of our planet that is so deeply interconnected, right? So, okay, so I think we might have maybe one last question for you, Marime. One of SACAT's goals is to support new and existing marine protected areas and also sustainable use zones. So what is the importance of these protected areas, and are they an effective solution?
Okay, so for us, we believed early on in setting aside protected areas because we understand that they form the basis in terms of the ocean resources. So if they're not managed properly, then they are not able to cater for the local population who depends on it for their livelihoods and pretty much everything. So fishing and coastal tourism accounts for the growth of the Seychelles economy. So for us, that was one of the key reasons. And in designing our marine spatial plan and in coming up and setting aside such a large area under protection, we did factor in how that will affect the local communities and the Seychelles economy as a whole. So therefore, this is why in our design, we didn't go all 30% no-take areas, mindful that, again, we promote ocean stewardship and we want people to be engaged in the conservation. So therefore, we introduced the sustainable use areas and categories under our protection regimes. And this has been very well received, and it has given people in the Seychelles more of an ownership in that they too now can help the government and the other big players in protecting our oceans for the future. And now more and more, and especially I'm happy to hear Dr. Whitney speak about blue carbon, because even within SACAT, we have been working with the local communities, particularly with seagrass meadows and ecosystems. We've been able to map that out, and we are also exploring now how to bring in those additional resources to the local communities on the ground for them to manage the areas. And that also includes work on mangrove. that we are doing. So it's all interlinked for us. So we have one vision under the whole blue economy vision that the country has. It has those different pillars. We have the biodiversity conservation, which we address under the protected area coverage that we've set up. We have the climate change resilience that is embedded in the work and the projects that we fund on the ground. But then we have the third pillar that we are now trying to develop is really bringing in the growth through the businesses, through the private sector, and partnerships, and getting them also to play a role to move away from the conventional thinking that, you know, conservation is only the business of conservation biologists, and making it or everybody's business, because we believe that the solutions are in nature, the solutions are in our oceans, and being from a small country that is almost 100% ocean, we believe all our solutions are in the ocean. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Conservation is everyone's business. Absolutely important, such an important statement for all of us to remember. Sam, so the solution to plastic pollution doesn't just end with cleanups, even though that's what we hear a lot about. How should we be thinking about the full life cycle of plastic as we build solutions to move away from this problem?
Definitely, I couldn't agree with you more. I think when we first installed our first barrier at Sungai Watch, we very quickly realized that that was not enough. You know, anyone can install a barrier in a river, anyone can do a cleanup, but without properly thinking of what happens to the trash collected afterwards, you know, it's not a very holistic solution, and it's very much just a bandage solution. And the other thing I will add is that plastic is an incredibly valuable material. When put through the right processes, we can actually turn waste into value and actually use that as a source to create more revenue. So at Sungai Watch, we're pulling in thousands and thousands of kilos of plastics on a daily basis, and we now have all this material available to us to turn into value, hopefully generate more revenue, and help us scale the organization. So I think we really need to focus our efforts not just on cleanups, but on the latter part, which is also sorting and properly processing the waste collected.
Yeah, that's great. So you have to think through the whole cycle, otherwise we're just going to be cleaning up beaches for the rest of our lives, which doesn't solve the problem, right? Okay, Dr. Whitney, last one. The mangrove breakthrough that was launched at COP27 aims to double the protection of mangroves globally and achieve $4 billion in investment by 2030. It's a big goal. What is innovative about this approach, and how can it be replicated beyond mangroves?
It is a big goal, and we feel it's very achievable. So I'm so excited to tell you about the mangrove breakthrough today. How many people have heard about the mangrove breakthrough thus far? Great. Okay, so I get to share it with all of you. So mangroves are the ultimate climate champion because of the livelihoods they bring, the coastal protection, supporting biodiversity, and of course being intensive carbon, what is the word that I'm thinking of? Sinks. There we go. And so in short, mangroves are critically important for people, nature, and climate. Now, we've lost vast areas of mangroves over the last half century, but there's reasons for hope, because there's evidence that the loss of mangroves, the loss rate of mangroves is slowing, and we have best practices. We know the best practices for restoring and conserving mangroves, and there's growing global recognition that mangroves are essentially a super tree. And so they can be, this mangrove breakthrough can be a key solution in our journey to 30 by 30 and in staying on track for 1.5. However, we urgently need more capital in order to realize this goal. And that's why Salesforce is supporting the mangrove breakthrough, and 3 reasons why we're especially excited about the breakthrough. One is that the goal is a science-based, clear target of 15 million hectares. And to get there, we need to restore half of recent losses, double protection of mangroves globally, secure sustainable financing for mangroves around the globe, and this is definitely achievable. The science shows us that it is. The second reason why we're very excited about this breakthrough is that they're not starting from scratch. This breakthrough is built on on trust and experience that has been built over years by some of the world's leading experts who have set aside individual interests in service to a shared goal. So that's the second reason. And then the third reason is that the mangrove breakthrough is ready to go. It has established this year a foundation in the form of a detailed finance roadmap as well as a strong governance structure. So I think the time is now to invest in mangroves, and business as usual is not going to get us where we need to in this decade. So, but the mangrove breakthrough will, but we need to support it. So,
Your excitement is palpable. I'm sure it's going to be very infectious. Okay, so with that, I want to say thank you very much to my panelists, Mari-May, Sam, and Whitney. You've given us a lot to think about, a lot of hope. It's great to see so many diverse spaces, people really thinking innovatively to drive change for our oceans in so many different spaces. And hopefully, people will follow suit, hear what you've got to say, be inspired, and follow suit. Thank you to all of you who are here, who came bright and early to join our panel. We hope you go away with renewed hope as well.
Thank you for joining this session. Please make your way to the main stage. The Pope is our first speaker this morning, so please don't miss it.